So welcome everyone to today's seminar. Today we have Thallis Pessi, who is an ESO fellow at the Paranal Observatory. Thallis, he obtained his undergrad at Universidade Federal de Santa Maria, here in our state, and then moved to do and master's, and then he moved to Chile at the Universidade Diego Portales, where he obtained his PhD. Thallis' main interests are on transient events resulting from cosmic explosions, particularly core collapse supernova. His work is strongly observational, and he collaborates with several transient surveys, including ESO's Supernova, I'm using an ESO+. So thank you very much, Thallis, for accepting our invitation. You may start when you're ready.
Okay. Yes, thanks. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for the invite of giving me talk here today. As Anna mentioned, I'm Thallis Pessi. I am a postdoctoral fellow working at ESO in Chile, where I do half of my time in the Paranal Observatory, working as support astronomer for the VLT. I work with the UT4 unit of VLT, and I am instrument fellow for the MUse instrument. So before I start this talk, I always like to explain why I find supernova interesting and why I find transients and cosmic explosions interesting. And I guess personally, it's because they are really the connection between stellar evolution, massive stellar evolution, and extragalactic astronomy. So at the same time as we study the final moments of massive stars, we also get to see these pretty pictures of galaxies such as this one. So this is a famous recent supernova, 2023 IXF. This was famous because this was the nearest supernova to happen in almost a decade. This happened in the arms of this galaxy, M101, as we can see here. And this is a Type II supernova. So this is the result of the explosion of our red supergiant star at the end of their lives. And as we can see also in this image, which is pretty interesting, is that this galaxy is populated by all of these H2 regions, these star-forming regions that are marked here in these purple colors in this galaxy. So as I was saying, at the same time as we can study the final stages of massive stars and stellar evolution, we also get to connect this with galaxy evolution in general, chemical evolution, and the result and the implications of supernova in galaxies. So supernova, they can be classified spectroscopically. We can, the most classical way of differentiating them is between Type Is and Type IIs. Type IIs show hydrogen in their spectra because they come from these red supergiant stars that keep their outer layers of hydrogen before exploding, while Type Is, they do not show hydrogen in their spectra. So this is telling us that they lose or they lost somehow these outer layers of hydrogen before exploding. It's a bit complicated. There are many different flavors, many different ways of classifying them. But the most important thing here is to do this connection, that the different observed properties that we see are telling us that there are different progenitor stars and different explosion mechanisms behind each supernova type. So the largest subgroups that we can classify supernova are between core collapse and thermonuclear. So not all supernova come from massive stars. We also have some that come from white dwarf stars or the explosion of these less massive stars. So core collapse is really this classical scenario that we imagine when massive stars reach the end of their lives, reach the iron peak formation in their nucleus. They cannot generate any more fusion. the outer layers of the star will start collapsing, the nucleus will collapse, generating a neutron star. These outer layers will rebound into the neutron star, and the neutron star formation will also produce a very strong burst of neutrinos. So all of these energies combined will result in this core collapse supernova explosion. The other way of generating a supernova, as I mentioned, is from lower massive stars, from white dwarf stars. So these are called thermonuclear supernova. And into the spectroscopic classification, they are the Type Ia supernova. So there are two ways that are still debated on how these supernova are generated. The first one is a scenario where we need, I think I can point here, we need a white dwarf star accreting material from a donor star. This accretion will increase the mass of the white dwarf. It will reach the Chandrasekhar mass, and then it will explode as a thermonuclear explosion. The other scenario is through the merger of two white dwarf stars. So for this, we don't need a donor star. We have two white dwarf stars spiraling, and eventually they will merge, also generating a Type Ia supernova. So I said that this is still debatable because we have evidence for both cases, for the single degenerate and the double degenerate scenario. That's how they are called. Within the core collapse supernova, we have the age-rich, the hydrogen-rich Type II core collapse supernova, but we also have the Type I's core collapse supernova. These are supernova that are generated by core collapse, but they do not show hydrogen in their spectra. And this is because that massive star somehow lost their outer layers of hydrogen, in the case of Type Ib's, and also lost hydrogen and helium layers in the case of Type Ics. For these scenarios, for these supernova types, there are also different scenarios of how they are generated. One of the scenarios is that they are generated by the binary stripping. So for this, they require relatively lower mass stars that is interacting in a binary system. The binary companion will strip the outer layers of hydrogen or even helium in some cases of that star. And then the star will explode into a core collapse supernova, and we see that spectra that does not show hydrogen. The other scenario is that they are generated by actually relatively higher mass stars, in which they have winds so strong that they lose these outer layers through some very strong winds in these higher mass stars. And for this scenario, usually people call for these Wolf-Rayet stars, which we see, at least in our Milky Way, we see how they lose their material and how they eject their material before, in the case of supernova, before exploding. Also, we have a special case of hydrogen-rich supernova, in which this explosion happened inside a very dense material, inside a very dense circumstellar material. And in this case, we see strong emission lines in their spectra. So these are usually called interacting supernova, because the supernova ejecta is interacting with some very massive circumstellar material. And in their spectra, we see, again, some strong emission lines like this, a combination of narrow and broad emission lines. And they are usually labeled Type IINs, 2 because of hydrogen and N because of narrow emission lines in their spectrum. So for this type of supernova, the most common scenario is that they come from, again, more massive stars than the typical red supergiants. So usually luminous blue variable stars are brought for this type of explosion, because this type of star really presents some very strong mass ejections at the end of their lives. And this, the amount of mass would be useful for explaining these emission lines that we see in their spectrum. But as I will show later, there are also some evidence that they come from actually lower mass stars, and this makes things a bit more complicated in explaining this type of event. So as you can see, we are really interested in explaining what are the different progenitor stars that generate the different supernova types. So one important question to ask is how we can identify these progenitor stars, how we can measure their mass and measure their age before generating the different supernova types. One way of doing that is directly observing that star before exploding. So this is a very useful method that gives very good results because we can, again, directly see the star and make measurements on that star. But it's a bit harder method to do, it's a bit more complicated. And this is because we need to be lucky, we need for the supernova to be nearby, and we need for that region to have good data, usually HST data to see that star before the supernova. So this is one example of a work by SMART 2015, where they show the progenitor star for the supernova, Type II supernova 2008 BK. Here we can see in the middle panel the supernova light itself. So this is the explosion. They went to the archive and looked at the position of the supernova, and they found at the same position a red star as it is shown here. Some months or years later, they went back again at that region. They took another image, and then we see that the star is not there anymore. So that red star, probably a red supergiant, generated this supernova and do not exist anymore. So this is, again, the most direct way of really knowing that that star generated this supernova type. And as I mentioned, we need to be lucky. It's a bit hard to obtain this type of data. And so far, we have around 30 measurements of this type. So it's not a lot, and it's not a lot to make statistically significant analysis on these progenitor stars. Of course, we have some indirect methods of measuring these progenitor masses, as the one I will explain here in my work, which will rely mostly on numbers. So we need large numbers, we need good data to do statistical tests on this data, and then retrieve the progenitor masses, the progenitor ages for these different supernova types. So my work focused mostly on analyzing the host galaxies and the local environments of the different supernova types, particularly through integral field spectroscopy, but we can also use imaging, long slit spectroscopy, and of course we can use other types of population analysis, such as analysis of rates or modeling these rates, combining them with stellar population synthesis. The study of the host galaxy of supernova was actually started very early on, as the first supernova were discovered, because people realized that there was a very particular separation between Type Ia host galaxies and Type II host galaxies. So at that time, people realized that Type II supernova, would occur only on spiral galaxies and close to star-forming regions in these galaxies. And these are some examples of Type II supernova here from different papers. And we see that they are all connected to these star-forming galaxies and to star-forming regions in these galaxies. On the other side, Type Ia supernova, they happen both in spiral galaxies and in elliptical galaxies, because, again, Type Ia come from older stellar populations, from low-mass stars, from white dwarf stars. And Type IIs, they come from from young stars, from recent star formation, and they are connected to more massive stars. So this is a very simple way of this first analysis that were done of separating the different host galaxies and connecting to progenitor stars of this supernovae. Of course, we can use better methods to analyze the environments and the host galaxies of supernova. in this work by Joseph Anderson and collaborators, they use age alpha imaging, age alpha photometry to check the connection between the different supernova types and the proximity to star-forming regions in these galaxies. So the closest given type is to the age alpha light, the closest it is to the star-forming regions in those galaxies. So here on the left, we can see the age alpha images, some examples. And here on the right, we see cumulative distributions for the different supernova types as a function of this quantity that will measure the proximity to a star-forming region. So the closest you are to the diagonal line in this plot, the closest you are to star-forming regions. Again, we see what was expected. Type Ia supernova, they don't have any connection, or they have the less connection to these star-forming regions, again, because they are connected to older stellar population. At the same time, we see this connection of Type Cs to the star-forming regions in this galaxy. And this is expected because Type Cs are the mostly stripped type of supernova. So they are probably connected to the most massive stars that lose both their hydrogen and helium before exploding.
SNe means what? It's because
yes. So this is supernova. SN is supernova, and 1A.
But I mean the why?
Where? Here. This is the fraction of total supernovae.
Supernova is not one type. It's
No. Sorry. Yeah. It's the plural of supernovas.
Transients.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, well, in this work, I focus on using integral field spectroscopy to analyze the host galaxies of supernova. Just briefly explaining, integral field spectroscopy means that we are in just one pointing, one observation, we are taking the spectra of the whole pointing in the way that for all of the pixels or all of the spaxels, we have a spectrum connected to them. So this video here is showing that besides the X and Y axis, which are the physical directions, we also have a Z dimension, which is the wavelength of these observations. So the result of this is known as a data cube. And in this video, we can see, for example, in these bright regions, the most bright lines in the spectra of this galaxy. So the importance of using data cubes and using IFS in my work is because we are interested not only in taking the information of the very local environment of the supernova. We could do that with a long slit spectroscopy, for example, but we really wanted to compare the local environment with the whole galaxy. So in this data, we have really the complete picture of the galaxies. We have the information of all the star-forming regions in those galaxies, of all the aged regions in those galaxies. So this type of analysis have been really done for the last 10 years, more or less. We have this first work by Luis Galvani and collaborators that used a large data set of integral field spectroscopy of supernova host galaxies from the Calar Alto Observatory in Spain. Here in the left, we can see one example of this integral field data of one of the galaxies. And here on the right, we have this plot again of the cumulative distribution, but as a function of age alpha equivalent width, so an information from the spectra that will measure basically the age of a given stellar population. So the age alpha equivalent width, the larger this value is, the more recent the star formation is in a given population. So what they are comparing here is basically the age associated to each supernova type. Again, we see these different distributions. The more to the left, the older your distribution is. And again, type 1As, they are connected to older stellar populations, and type 2s and type 1bcs, which are core collapse supernova, they are connected to younger stellar populations or larger values of age alpha equivalent width in this case. So in this context, it came the idea of doing these observations with MUse. So MUse is really an amazing instrument, and this is not only because I work with it, it's because it really is. In its conception, the idea was to build a large panoramic instrument with a large field of view. So MUse has a field of view of 1 by 1 arc minute. It has a high spatial sampling, meaning that for each pixel, we really have a high signal to noise ratio of that pixel, so we can get a lot of details in the observation. And at just one pointing, we can get 90,000 simultaneous spectra at just one observation, which is really amazing. One of the ideas, again, of the conception of MUse was that it would have also a high image quality at the same time of high spectroscopic quality. And one thing that is important for my work is that it has this wide wavelength coverage in the optical that really has of the main emission lines that I study. So this is one image of MUse that I've put, one image that I took, but I guess here in this image, we can really have an idea of how big the instrument is compared to one person. And it's,
How messy.
it is a bit of a mess. We have all of these cryogenic tubes here for the cooling system. Yeah, it's not, I mean, for me, it's very beautiful. And MUse works in a slightly different way than normal integral field units. And this is one of the reasons why it works so well. So the basic concept is that in the observations, the instrument we use what is called a field splitter that will separate the image into 24 different channels. These different channels go inside one specific IFU, each of these channels. We have a set of relay optics, some complicated optics inside the instruments that will separate the light. Inside each of IFU, it will separate the light again into 48 different slits or slitlets that each one will generate a different spectrum. So this will be imaged to a 4K by 4K CCD, again generating these 90,000 spectra that I mentioned. So in this work was the work that really defined how we use MUse to study host galaxies of supernova. This was basically a test of the power of using this instrument to analyzing transient host galaxies. So this was a work again by Luis Galvani in 2016. And we can see here the difference in the resolution of the images compared to the image before, where we can see many more details of this galaxy. All of these black circles here are identified H2 regions in these galaxies, because in this work, what I wanted to check is the properties of these H2 regions and how the host H2 regions would compare with the H2 regions present in all of the galaxies. So, and this is what they did here in this plot in the right. Again, they are measuring the age alpha equivalent width, which is used to tell us the age of a given stellar population. Each of these cumulative distribution is one galaxy, and all of the H2 regions in that galaxy. And they are comparing in these points, in these marks here, how the host H2 region of a given supernova would compare with the whole galaxy. For example, here we have this square here. So this host H2 region, this supernova host H2 region, is younger than the median for this whole galaxy, while we have another star here that's happening at older H2 regions if compared to that host galaxy. So with this idea in mind, then the idea of the amusing survey came to be. Amusing stands for the All-weather MUse Supernova Integral field of nearby galaxies. And the idea of this project was to use the failure observation time or the non-ideal weather conditions at the observatory to observe supernova host galaxies. So back then, 10 years ago, it's not a reality anymore, but this non-ideal weather times would be relatively easier to obtain than the normal or the ideal weather conditions, because the pressure on the ideal weather conditions would be so high, and a lot less people would apply for these not so great weather conditions. So under this idea of a failure observations that could be done at any weather conditions, basically, that they started proposing for the amusing observations. So the PIs of these first projects are listed here. Joe Anderson was my co-advisor of my PhD. And so far, so here I'm also showing all of the observations in the sky of this of amusing. So far, there has been 17 proposals accepted with MUse. This results in more than 1,200 observed hours with the instrument and more than 730 observed galaxies. So far, all of these resulted in more than 30 papers published. So within amusing, there was observations of core collapse supernova host galaxies, and this data set, this set of observations became the main project of my PhD that resulted in this paper that I'm mentioning here. So this data set that I analyzed had 112 core collapse supernova host galaxies. This is to date the largest data set of supernova host galaxies analyzed with MUse. Here on the right, we see some of examples of these galaxies that I analyzed with these yellow squares showing the MUse pointings. And this pie plot here show the different supernova types in my data set. Most of them are type 2s, and this is expected because type 2s are the most commonly discovered core collapse supernova types in surveys. But again, we have some some interesting numbers, some good numbers of the other subtypes, including the stripped envelope supernova subtypes. So my goal in this analysis was really to analyze the H2 regions of these galaxies and connect and extract the parameters of the H2 regions that hosted the supernova, and also compare with the whole all of the H2 regions in those galaxies. So this is
Quick question.
yes.
So type 2s are core, type 1.
Yeah.
Type 2s is core collapse, right?
Yes, all of them are core collapse.
1C, 1B also are.
Yes, so type 2s have hydrogen in their spectra, and type 1s do not have hydrogen.
They are core collapse.
They are core collapse.
Not collision of
No, so these are type 1As.
just type 1s, and these are much rarer.
No, type 1As are very common.
Oh, very common.
Yeah,
And these are the ones that are distance indicators.
yes, they are
Only
yeah.
one
1As. Yeah, and this is because, I mean, they come from white dwarfs, so white dwarfs are very similar to each other,
Okay.
so they can be used as estimators of distance. Yeah. Yeah, I agree that these names are a bit messy, and also astronomers are not very creative in giving names. So yeah, so type 1Bs and 1Cs, they are core collapse also, yeah. Yeah, so this is one example of a galaxy in my data set. Here I'm showing a color combination of 3 main emission lines that we analyzed: oxygen, Ag alpha, and sulfur. The green parts, the green peaks, are the most interesting because they are tracing the H2 regions in those galaxies. And in this particular case, this galaxy hosted this supernova 2018 IE, which is a type 1c supernova. And we can see that is on top of H2 region here. So the way we did this analysis was first through segmenting all of these host galaxies into H2 regions. For that, I used this code called IFU analysis, which was basically built for this collaboration and to analyze MUse data of supernova host galaxies. So what this code do is that it will trace all of the H-alpha emission in the galaxies, and it will segment, given a set of parameters, segment the H2 regions, as we can see here on the right. All of these circles are H2 regions in that galaxy that have been segmented. So from this information, we can extract the spectra of all of the segmented H2 regions, and then estimated all of the interesting parameters for our analysis for these regions. So in this case, I'm showing the example of metallicity. So metallicity given by the oxygen abundance in this spectra. Here we see the segmented H2 regions in this galaxy, and the colors are showing the metallicity values of these H2 regions. And it's nice to see here that we have this gradient of larger metallicities in the nucleus to lower metallicities in the arms of the galaxies. And here in the right plot, we can see where the supernova is placed on top of these parameters. So with all of this information, the first part of this work that I did was to analyze and compare the different supernova host H2 regions between the different subtypes. So I wanted to check how these different parameters would differentiate between the different supernova subtypes, taking the information from their host H2 region. So this is what I'm showing here in this plot. I guess the most important plot here to pay attention is this right one, because I'm separating between type 2s in blue, type 2Ns, which are the interacting supernova in green, and in orange, the stripped envelope supernova. So here I'm doing these cumulative distributions as a function of oxygen abundance or metallicity. And we can see that the stripped envelope supernova, they are happening with a larger median metallicity than type 2s and type 2Ns. This is also the case for the H-alpha equivalent liquidity. So this is another parameter. And again, we see that stripped envelope supernova, they are connected to younger regions or larger values of H-alpha equivalent liquidity in this case. And another interesting result that we take from here is that type 2s and type 2Ns, they are happening with similar values of H-alpha equivalent width, pointing through, at least in this sample, through similar progenitor ages or similar stellar populations that results on them. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is not expected because we really expect type 2Ns or interacting supernova to come from higher mass stars or younger stars than type 2 supernova. And the last parameter we analyzed was this one, the star formation rate. This is normalized by the area of each H2 region. And again, we see that stripped envelope supernova, they are happening in regions with higher values of star formation rates than type 2s and type 2Ns. So this is already, all of these results are already giving us a good hint of the properties of supernova progenitors, and that stripped envelope supernova, they are being generated by younger, more matter-rich, and they are connected to regions with higher values of star formation rate. So we can go a bit beyond that, and instead of just these comparisons, we can connect these observations with some theoretical modeling. And this is what I did last year, and recently there was a paper published. So I was collaborating with this group from Greece. that they developed this code called Poseidon. So this is a binary stellar population synthesis code. And what they do is that basically they take binary systems, they evolve these binary systems given a set of initial conditions of different properties. They will follow the interaction between the binaries, so the different types of interactions which are basically listed here, and then follow what would be the supernova resulting from these interactions given the initial set of parameters. So here, there's a lot of information in this plot, but I guess we can just look at these two, where for the higher metallicity case, 2 solar metallicity, we have a lot of type 1c supernova being generated, which are these blue dashes here, while in the very low metallicity regime of 0.01 solar metallicity, we basically don't have type 1c supernova. Again, type 1cs are the mostly stripped core collapse type, but we have a lot more of type 2 supernova, which are the ones that come from red supergiant stars. So the way we connected this modeling with my observations was by doing these relative fractions as a function of metallicity in this case. Again, there's a lot of information here, but we can focus at this a bit. For example, this blue dashed line is there, a modeling track, the evolution of these relative rates as a function of metallicity. These black squares are my data. So we see that at least they are increasing, so following this theoretical track. Except for this low metallicity, very low metallicity regime. And my guess is that because we have very low numbers there, so we have very large uncertainties. But the good thing, I mean, the interesting result from here is that we see that the observational fractions that we have follow these theoretical tracks from stellar population modeling. So just a summary of this first part of this work. So what are the implications of these results for core collapse supernova progenitor stars? So as I showed, stripped envelope supernova, they are connected to younger stellar populations. We see some similar environments between type 2Ns and type 2s, suggesting similar progenitor stars. And as I just showed you, this fraction of type 1 BCs to type 2s shows this dependence on metallicity. So in the second part of this work, we wanted to compare the very local environment of the supernova, the H2 region host for those supernova, to all of the other H2 regions detected in their galaxies. So this is what I did here, and I'm showing one example in this plot. Again, I'm showing a cumulative distribution as a function of metallicity. And one very interesting result that we found that was a bit unexpected was that all of the core collapse supernova host H2 regions metallicities, they are shifted to lower metallicity values than the distribution of H2 regions in those galaxies. So as we can see here in the red distribution, we have the core collapse supernova H2 regions, and the black distribution, we have all of the star forming regions detected in all of the galaxies. And for some reason, the red distribution is to the left. So the core collapse are happening in lower metallicity values than the whole distribution of star forming regions. So this result was so intriguing, and that we actually published this as a separate result in this short letter here. And we tried to come with some explanations for why this was happening. So first, we wanted to somehow quantify this result. So what we were seeing is that core collapse supernova are happening in lower metallicity regions if compared to the other star-forming regions. So we decided to do a plot like this. So these are violin plot distributions that are basically taking this value here, which is the number of core collapse supernova to happen in a given metallicity bin, divided by the total star formation rate in that metallicity bin. And we divide by the star formation rate in order to normalize this by the star formation rate. So we basically take out the star formation of this equation, so we really see the number or the occurrence of core collapse supernova as a function of metallicity. And what we see is really a decreasing trend here. At low metallicities, we have much higher occurrence of core collapse supernova than at higher metallicity, at solar metallicity, for example. So this, again, was a bit unexpected. So we came out with some possible explanations and some possible implications for these results. The first one would be that this is really a selection effect. We might be, for example, missing core collapse supernova in higher extincted regions because they are also the higher metallicity regions in those galaxies. So the plot I just showed you would be showing that we are missing supernovas somehow. We don't think that is the case because the survey we used for this sample, Assassin, is really efficient in detecting transients into highly extincted regions of galaxies. So this might not be the case. Another possible explanation, this would be very interesting because it would connect to other fields, is that the IMF, at least in this galaxy that we are seeing, really has a dependence on metallicity. So in many areas of astronomy, we always assume that the IMF do not depend on environment properties, it do not depend on metallicity, but we might be seeing a hint in that direction from core collapse supernova observations that more massive stars are being generated and are being generated in the low metallicity regions of those galaxies. From the physics of supernova itself could be that the explodability or the ability of a given star to be to explode into a supernova would depend on metallicity, would be affected by metallicity. And this is really a field that is not very explored. There are a few works in recent years showing some results in that direction, that actually if you have binary stars, could be that in low metallicities, it's easier for them to explode into a supernova. And of course, could be any other unknown mechanism that we didn't explore here. And I would be happy to hear if you have any interesting idea on this.
Yes. I mean the distance in the galaxy, because we know that there is the metallicity gradient that decreases outwards. So maybe you
Okay,
talk
I can tell later, yeah. So as an interesting legacy of all of this work, I think is that we produced all of these H2 region maps for these galaxies as a function of different properties of metallicity, H-alpha equivalent with the star formation rate, and we made them available for the community. So if you are interested in analyzing star forming regions in nearby galaxies with MUse, please check out this data set. It's very interesting. Again, it's more than 100 galaxies with all of the H2 regions in them estimated for different parameters. So in this last part of this presentation, I wanted to talk a bit about other interesting results. So other analyses of different transients that were done also with amusing data by the collaboration. So in this first work that I'm showing here was led by Joseph Lyman and collaborators, and they investigate these the environments of this subtype of Type Ia supernova, which are called Type Iax. So these are fast declining Type Ias and also less intrinsically brighter Type Ias. And some scenarios would say that they come actually from younger systems than the typical white dwarf systems that we use for Type Ias. So this is what they did in this work. They analyzed the host galaxies of this Type Iax and compared with normal Type Ias and also quark-collapse supernova. So here we have cumulative distributions, again, as a function of metallicity. We see as this pink distribution here, which is the distribution for Type Iax, that actually the metallicity is similar to the quark-collapse supernova, which are these other colors, while the Type Ias would happen at higher metallicity values. And again, they do a plot similar to the one I showed in the beginning, where the closest you are to the diagonal line here, the closest you are following the star formation rate. Sorry, the star forming regions in those galaxies. And in this case, we see the Type Ias on the top. So they do not show any connection to star forming regions, while this Type Iax, they show a large similarity with these Type IIs and this other type, I think it's 1b's here. Yeah, so these results, they are telling us that actually their environments are more similar to quark-collapse supernova than Type Ias, which is consistent with these predictions that they come from either the younger thermonuclear systems or this particular case of a quark collapse, which is called the electron capture quark collapse supernova, which is a quark collapse from a lower mass star than the typical Type IIs. So in 2018, there was this discovery of this very interesting transient, 2018 COW, or the cow, as it is famous for. This is a very unique transient that now is part of a class of transients called fast blue optical transients. This was the first case and the most well-studied case because it happened nearby. So in this work, again, by Joseph Lyman and collaborators, they use amusing data to study the environment of this transient, the cow, and which until today serves as a really case for this whole class of fast blue optical transients. So as we can see here on the left, we have the RGB image of this galaxy. Here, as this red cross, we have the position of this transient on that galaxy. And on the right, we have the age alpha light of this galaxy taken from the MUse cube. And we can see that it is also segmented into different H2 regions. So one interesting result already that we can take from here is that this transient happened close to these very bright H2 regions, again showing that they might come from younger systems or higher mass stars. They did also an analysis of the age alpha equivalent with it, and they noticed that it was happening at values larger than the median for Type IINs and also stripped envelope supernova. So giving us an idea that this type of transient could come from higher mass stars or younger stars. So in this last year, I also collaborated with this group that was analyzing the host galaxies of tidal disruption events. So this work was led by Thomas Pursiainen, and this is the largest data set to date of TDE host galaxies to be analyzed. So a tidal disruption event, just briefly explaining, is the explosion, is the transient that we usually detect in the nucleus of galaxies, and they probably come from a star that is disrupted by the supermassive black hole in that galaxy. We really don't know. There are some debates on what types of stars are being disrupted, if they are lower mass stars or higher mass stars. So here on the left, I'm showing some examples of some galaxies that were analyzed in this work. These are the MUse data for these galaxies. And the most interesting feature of this MUse data is that really we can reach this sub-kiloparsec scale around the host nucleus. So we can really extract information of the stellar population that is around the galaxy nuclei. So one interesting result that came out from this while they were analyzing this data is that they realized that a large fraction, around 5 out of 10 of 20, sorry, of these galaxies would show the presence of these extended emission line regions in their data. So these regions are detected by the O3 emission features in these galaxies, and they are only present in galaxy mergers. So they are only present in these disturbed systems, showing possibly a connection between these tidal disruption events and these galaxy mergers. Of course, these numbers are not large. We don't have large numbers in this case, but this could be something interesting to be analyzed again in the future if tidal disruption events are somehow connected to galaxy mergers. And finally, I think the most interesting result that came out from this work was the analysis of the age, of the typical age of the stellar populations close to where the tidal disruption events happened. And what they found was that these stars, these stellar populations would have an age of around 1 billion years or 1 giga years. And this would mean that the stars that are connected to this age would have masses, initial masses below 2.5 solar masses. And this is a bit in attention with what is predicted from the light curve modeling of TDEs of tidal disruption events that would predict higher mass stars, that these disrupted stars that we see are actually higher mass stars, while what we are seeing here is that, at least in this data set, they are coming from lower mass stars and older stellar populations. So just a summary of all of what I just said. In 10 years of the MUse survey, we have observed more than 730 supernova host galaxies. These data cubes and also these parameter maps that I showed, they are made available for the community. They have put in different works constraints on core collapse supernova environments and progenitor systems, and also in other transient progenitors. And coming soon, probably this year, there will be a paper for a full data release of MUse. So before finishing, I want to sponsor my institute. So if you're interested in coming to Chile, if you're interested in coming to ESO, which is an amazing environment to work, there are opportunities from late undergrad masters to more senior stages. So please talk to me if you are interested in coming and working there. So yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Great talk, Thallis. Questions and answers on the line. Okay, Marina.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. Very nice presentation. I'm just curious about the TDEs because I saw a paper some time ago that they are preferentially found in post-starburst galaxies, but it doesn't seem to be the case here because I saw some star-forming galaxies. Do you still find this kind of thing that they reside in PSBs or not?
Yeah, so I think this is like different results from different analyses. So at least in this case, of this type of our sample, at least, they are not.
It's not PSBs.
Yeah, they are not, but it's a relatively small sample, so could be that in the general case, yes, yes.
But
Yes, I have actually a couple of questions. One is
one per time.
the certain sample of supernovae, does it include a previous supernova explosions before using on the hosts, or the analysis you show include only supernovas discovered during using? And if I may, could high metallicity progenitors of supernova lead to shorter explosions? And could that be a selection effect, given that you have the data sampling that has some space in time, and you could be missing the short explosions? I wonder.
Okay.
You asked for feedback about what.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Sorry for the two questions.
No, that's great. Yeah. So the first question, yes. So all of the supernova, they were observed after they are discovered, because the way it was working is that we would take a given sample of, say, last year, 100 supernova were discovered by this survey. So they would be submitted to be observed with MUse. There are some older galaxies, but they're not part of MUse, in that older galaxies that were also observed with MUse. So all of the proposals that were submitted for MUsing were recent samples.
Recent.
Yeah, of recent supernova. And yeah, this is because basically the recent surveys, they would be more complete, they would be more homogeneous, and this would be great for analyzing their host galaxies. So the second question is that I don't think there are any, at least modeling in that direction, that lower metallicity would produce shorter light curves.
It's the opposite, the other way around. Provide longer, and then you detect more on lower metallicity.
Yeah, at least I don't remember that right now. Yeah, so I don't think so. Yes, thanks.
Okay, I have one question related to what Basilio asked, that I've been wanting to ask all
Okay.
How do you select your samples? Because supernova are transients, and then how does it work with observing all of this? Do you apply like a TOO time, or
No.
how does it work?
Yeah, so we are only interested in the galaxy, so we are not interested in the supernova information with the MUse data. So what we will do, for example, is to check, well, this sample was discovered 2 years ago or last year. Then we'll take the whole catalog and submit for observations. And this is important because we are not, for example, checking for brighter galaxies or larger galaxies, sorry, because this would bias somehow the data. So we go check the whole catalog of a given survey that discovered, I don't know, 100, 200 supernova, and we would submit everything to be observed.
So mostly you observed after.
Yeah,
It
after.
was completely gone.
After, yes.
Did you ever discover one that came to time?
No, but some people discovered remnants. So a supernova that happened 200 years ago, and we didn't know, they found in these MUse data cubes, just looking at the remnants. Yeah.
Titan?
Yeah.
And then how?
I noticed that the supernova seems to be kind of distance from the moon. Yeah. So I wonder if it has to do with, and I didn't understand when you compared the metallicities with the H2 regions. It was H2 regions on the same radius, or the H2 regions in the whole galaxy. How is the comparison with the metallicity of the H2 regions for you to conclude that the metallicity of the supernova were lower than the metallicity of the H2 regions? So what's the comparison?
Yeah, so we didn't do that. We took everything. So all of the H2 regions, we didn't take into consideration the radius, for example. Yeah. And this is actually a recent comment that someone gave to me of taking a specific radius and then comparing there. So I think that's something I need to do in the future.
Yeah, there is this gradient you showed. Crazy metallicity distance.
Yes, thanks.
Rafael?
So thanks, Thallis. I have a question on project proposal.
Okay.
The question, like, if you take a given survey, I mean, the fraction of different types would be biased given, like for the supernova community, cosmology just care about type of wavelengths.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you map that in the sense that once you look for correlations or trying to find causal relations, you are bringing somehow the bias from the observed supernova?
Yeah.
Is that something that you can account for somehow?
Yes, so yeah, so this is for this work something that we really took care to be the most homogeneous as possible. And for that we used this survey called Assassin. Yes, it's called Assassin. So this was really one of the first surveys that would image the whole sky. So before that, the surveys they would look into a galaxy and image the galaxy like every night and then compare the same galaxy. So what I mean, modern surveys they do this way, LSST is doing that, is that they survey the whole sky, no matter if there is a galaxy or not, and they try to find transients there. So this really makes the sample unbiased as a function of host galaxy properties. I'm not sure if that's the question.
Yeah, I was
Or-
just wondering.
And
about-
also supernova types,
Yeah.
because you can discover anything.
So about the project,
Yeah.
how do you see like, since you are working also further inside we talked about it, because you can get the geometric properties of the environment now, right? Do
Yeah.
you see anything that you think might be interesting in the future?
Actually, yes, I was thinking about that. Yeah, maybe I need to talk to you on how to do that, but this
But
was
we can actually look at
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
The geometric properties
So
of the environment.
instead of using this code like IF analysis that I was using, what this code do is that it takes a fixed radius for the edged regions. And what I wanted to do was maybe changing the radius or changing the shape, not to be circular, for
Mhm.
example. So I think that would be interesting. And that could be done by Capybara, I think.
Oh, I want questions from the students. You have questions? How do you separate the sky from
I wanted to ask that after. It's a long
Okay,
conversation.
so ask this.
So you said that amusing is taken in non-ideal weather. So that also might include more turbulence and more lunar illumination.
Yeah.
How do you account for that during the reduction?
Yeah, so during the observations, we usually take the object and the sky. So it's an offset. So yeah, so it's object, sky, then we use this for the data reduction and subtract this.
And
Yeah.
I was just, I actually checked the data previously. So is the data that is already there, is it reduced by ESO or by amusing field?
No, it's by the team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is I mean, ESO, when they put into the archive, they do a re-reduction,
Yeah.
which in most cases is good, but we are trying to be consistent, so we are reducing again this data. Yeah.
Do you have questions from online or YouTube?
Oh, that's my mom.
I love it. So I guess we can thank Thallis for the very nice talk. And we have coffee break outside of the room, and we have coffee and snacks, both savory and sweet.
Great.